Chapter 37 Transfer of Power. Ino made a mental reminder to visit the Savanti people during peacetime. She had no doubt that the transfer of power ceremony would have been grander and more extravagant in different circumstances, but it would not be so today. On the front steps of the administration building, the now former Oracle, Drex Aster, shook hands with Rylan, and Rylan became the new Savanti ruler with very little fanfare. Rylan kept his inaugural speech short, explaining to both the gathered crowd and those watching through news cameras that the Savanti administration faced an existential threat, and that the events of the next few days would decide the fate of their civilization. Rylan urged his people to volunteer for whatever support role they were capable of, and he promised that he would honor digital democracy by risking everything to preserve it for the next generation. Then, Rylan was escorted inside the administration building, where he would be brought into the special cybernetic network used by the Savanti government. Meanwhile, Ino turned to her crew. "No time to lose. Let's get to work." All surviving members of the Marathon crew who were strong enough to walk were put to work. Sota and Chief Engineer Kazuki spent their time inside the inner workings of the dark matter cloaking field generator, guiding a team of human and Savanti workers. Elodie was cleared for duty by a reluctant Zapata, who immediately took command of the local garrison. Some people tried to point out that training a garrison for planetary battle was pointless, but Ino quickly shut down that kind of talk. Elodie was raising morale by teaching people to fight. "She's letting the locals know we still have a chance," Ino explained. "We need that hope right now." Ashok Raha and Hoshi Yamada were embedded in the crew of the last two Savanti corvettes. These small starships were ineffective against the fleet arrayed against the colony, but Ino saw their value in a possible asymmetric battle. "If it comes to that point, we can't fight a conventional battle," Ino told the team. "If the enemy tries to land, those little corvettes would let us become a highly mobile guerrilla force." Crispin, Miracle Hamilton, Reza Agdashlu, and Hermione Durand were working on a backup plan with the Savanti. In truth, this was really the original plan that became a backup once Ino's idea was adopted. A massive team of Savanti workers had started digging a network of tunnels underneath the city. Should the plan to hide fail, Rylan would relocate as much of the colony as possible underground. From here, a subterranean guerrilla war was still possible, and there would be some hope of holding out until help arrived. Crispin and Hamilton helped plan the layout of the massive network, while Reza and Hermione got their hands dirty, helping to operate the digging machines. The surviving pilots from the Marathon demanded to be put back into service. Alan Sharp, the man who once made a bad first impression on Ino by sexually harassing her in the All Ranks Club, was asked for command of a Savanti hovercraft squadron. Rylan, who knew the man's combat experience, gave him a whole air wing. Dylan Kelly became advisor to Ino and Rylan, helping them find last-second flaws in Ino's plan. "Cold fusion power plants can be detected from low orbit. The enemy won't have an exact fix, but they'll know something is down there and have a general idea of where they should be searching. We need to be ready to shut them down and go to backups, just in case." Elodie's boyfriend, Pavlo Ivashchenko, volunteered to fly a heavy-lift hovercraft. He transported people and cargo just about anywhere in the source, setting speed records that would have made the civilian workers nervous in peacetime. It all came to a head just 2 days later. From Rylan's new office in the administration building, Ino watched as he gave the final order. "Go dark." Standing in the center of the colony, the jury-rigged cloaking tower was the tallest building on the sanctuary moon. It loomed high above the rest of the city, nearly half a kilometer tall. When Rylan gave the signal, technicians at ground level connected the Marathon's antimatter power plant to the dark matter cloak generator. 2 large sails, salvaged from Marathon, unfurled from the tower and extended to their fully open positions. A system of cables pulled the cloaking sails tight and held them in a stable position. "Here we go," Rylan said, watching the large digital screen at the far end of his office. Ino held her breath. Chief Engineer Kazuki and Sota Beninato stared hard at the data coming through their own laptops. "EM wavelengths are being scattered," Sota reported. "We are no longer visible on visible light and infrared, UV, microwave, radio, X-ray, and there goes gamma ray. We have full EM spectrum cloaking." Rylan clenched his fists. Ino could see how nervous he was. "Analyze our power drain and report," Rylan ordered. For a moment, the only sound in the Oracle's office was the nervous tapping of keyboards. Finally, Sota spoke. "Power drain is at expected levels," Sota said. "Barring any changes, the antimatter power plant will fail in exactly 5 months, 11 days, and 9 hours. Ino swore. "So the cloaking generator really is consuming more power than the antimatter plant can replace? I thought we engineered that problem out." "So did I," said Kazuki. "Maybe we didn't factor in the atmosphere correctly." Everyone looked at each other nervously. Then a bolt of realization hit Ino. "The atmosphere is still changing," she said. "Azarin told us the terraformation process would take years. That's why our numbers are off. The composition of the air around us is still fluctuating." "Shit," Sota said. "Kazuki, I'll work the numbers. You go check on the team digging the tunnel network." While Kazuki left the office, Sota looked at Ino. "What do you think?" he said. "Keep working on the tunnels as a backup, definitely," Ino said. "I'm going to keep hoping that Delegate and Axiom get away." "There's that word again," Prisbin muttered. "Hope? Why not?" Ino replied. "I can plan and scheme all day long. But hope is why I get up the next morning to plan and scheme some more." Nearly 3,000 light-years away, deep inside a UN starbase, a high-ranking admiral in the Coalition Navy was cursing himself for being forgetful. He was in the officers' mess, watching a television broadcast alongside dozens of other military officers. On the screen, a large African man was being asked to raise his right hand and repeat an oath. "I, Lintha Mandalenkosi, do solemnly swear to devote my life and ability in defense of the United Nations of Earth, to defend the Constitution of Man, and to further the universal rights of all sentient life." Admiral James Ruel wanted to watch the swearing-in of the new President of Earth, but he was distracted when his smartphone started loudly ringing. Several officers shushed him before turning back to the screen. Admiral Ruel pulled out his phone and tapped the volume button to silence it. Up on the screen, President Mandalenkosi started to give his inaugural address. Admiral Ruel looked down at his phone, mentally chastising himself for forgetting to silence it earlier. The notification on the screen was not a missed call or even a message, but a reminder. Follow-up, Lieutenant Commander Esperanta, career progression, 1-year review. A jolt of sadness went through the Admiral. He knew that he must have put this reminder into his calendar before the war started. Had it really been 3 years since the Galax incident? Admiral Ruel absent-mindedly left the officer's mess and made his way back to his office. 3 months ago, Ruel had been heartbroken to learn that Ino Esperanta was listed as missing in action, just a few short days before the Nexus storm inflicted a cataclysm on most of the galaxy. Earth, and the Coalition as a whole, was thrown into a deep crisis by the natural disaster, and the war in the Weeping Ghost Nebula was mostly forgotten these days. People were more concerned about reconstruction and rising tensions with the synthetic workforce, who was doing most of the work in said reconstruction. He was upset at having lost who he thought was a promising young officer, someone who had the potential to go far in the Coalition. He knew there was no point in checking to see whether Ino was alive or dead. Nearly all starship crews who went MIA were eventually declared dead, but there was a tiny speck of hope in the back of his mind. If Admiral Ruel was a betting man, he would have put a little money on the possibility, however faint, that Ino could have survived the devastating ambush in the Isval system. He supposed there was no harm in checking. In his office, Admiral Ruel filtered through the situation reports filed by Coalition starships. He focused on ships that had recently evacuated the Weeping Ghost Nebula, either via the Hodronus wormhole or by going the long way around Chor's compass. Strategic Command was convinced that no Coalition ships remained in Savanti space, that anyone who had not evacuated by now was either destroyed or captured. When he asked the Secretary AI to search for any recent use of the name Esperanta, he found records of a few other people in the Coalition Navy with that name, but none with the given name Ino. Admiral Ruel was about to give up his search as a fruitless exercise when one more search result appeared at the bottom of the page. It was a situation report from one of the sentry ships at the Tianavek wormhole, just a few million kilometers from the Admiral's office. The Dalian-class destroyer Shendong encountered debris exiting the wormhole's event horizon, suggesting a vessel had broken up while transiting the wormhole from Hodronus to Tianavek. He read aloud. No bodies recovered. Multiple androids found in wreckage. Mix of Coalition military hardware and civilian androids, including one Boston Dynamics courier droid that made reference to MIA Coalition officers Esperanta, Beninato, and Valant under questioning. What?
Something catch your eyes untold. Fear of darkness lingers here. You tremble as you get the fear. Now you're on the cornerstone, fearing you'd be left alone. Who will lose, who will prevail?